Let's say, what's your time worth? You're a university student. Well, it's certainly worth minimum wage, because obviously, but it's worth way more than that, because if you spend a productive hour when you're 20, then you gain the benefits of that hour for the rest of your life. So there's the compounding effect of time spent when we were young. So I say, well, let's assume your time's worth $50 an hour, which I think is an underestimate, but whatever. Let's call it 50. We could call it 25, but we'll call it 50. So that's $2,000 a week you're wasting. It's $100,000 a year. It's like, how much better would your life be if you weren't wasting $100,000 a year? It's like, what is that over 40 years? $4 million. It's like, you're rich. You don't even know it. Quit wasting time. By your own definition. It's like people shake their heads, like, oh, I never thought about it that way. It's like, yeah, think about it that way. Don't waste your damn life. And then you think, well, why would people be resistant to that message? It's like, well, you really want to wake up and figure out that you're wasting half your life? And you know, when people do that kind of wasting, they actually hate it. You know, and I've had lots of people come to my clinical practice who were chronic procrastinators. You know, and so they're watching YouTube videos, say, but not ones that are good for them, although sometimes they will do that, but just browsing in that kind of mindless way that you do when you're not paying attention and you're trying to kill time. And people doing that, they feel bad, they get depressed, they feel anxious, they can't get away from it, they feel kind of quasi-addicted.
That's what they're saying about social media now. It's a huge issue with young kids. Absolutely,
but there's this feeling of kind of internal rot and corruption that goes along with it. It's like, yeah, well, you're wasting your life. It's like, so it's painful. It's painful to recognize that. Then it's painful to think, oh my God, look how undisciplined I am. I don't know anything. I can't use a schedule. I can't stick to a calendar. I don't have any aims. I don't know anything about the world, right? And maybe there's a part of me that's bitter because I haven't got everything already, and I'd just like to say, to hell with it. That's the recognition of the Jungian shadow. It's like, that's what makes you vicious and untrustworthy. All of that. No one wants to look at that, and no bloody wonder. But hey, the alternative is worse. So
the problem is, you say, like, just saying you stop wasting your life. Like, I think that's not enough. I think this is one of the reasons why a book like this is so important. Like, the idea of discipline in most people's eyes is like, if you're not a disciplined person, it's uncomfortable, it's going to be painful, it's frustrating, you have to force yourself into these things. It's a muscle. It's a muscle that has to be developed, and these patterns have to be developed in your own mindset.
Incrementally.
Yes.
Yeah, well, so you're right, just telling people not to waste their lives is not enough, and this is another reason why I've so much enjoyed being a clinical psychologist, because clinical psychologists don't stick with high-level abstractions, especially the behaviors. They're really practical. It's like, okay, you want to get your act together. It's like, well, how about if, let's say you're not studying well, and so we do a real analysis of how much you're studying. You say, well, I go to the library 4 hours a day. It's like, yeah, okay. How much time do you actually study in the library? Well, you know, I waste time. I have to travel there. I look at my phone. It's like, okay, well, how much? 15 minutes? Half an hour? How much is real studying? Well, maybe we figure out it's 15 minutes. Say, okay, so what you're going to do for 1 week is you're going to study for half an hour. That's all. You don't get to go to the library for 4 hours. You have to sit down, we'll figure out a time, 10 o'clock in the morning, whatever, we'll put it in your schedule. Try to study for half an hour, no more. And then just come back and let's have a conversation about how well that worked. And people will come back and they say, well, you know, I managed it 4 days, and one day I went over, and one day I couldn't do it at all. It's like, okay, that's better. Instead of 75 minutes of studying, you know, 15 minutes a day for 7 days, what is that, 15, 70, 105 minutes, you've managed about 210 minutes. So you've already produced an improvement of 50% in your bumbling, horrible way. You got a 50% improvement in 1 week. It's like, that's deadly. It's like, so in the future authoring program, what we ask people to do is, well, think about your life along 6 dimensions. What do you want for your, so the goal is this, you're going to take care of yourself. You're going to have a life in 3 years that justifies its suffering. That's the goal. So you can invent the damn life, but you have to think what you would be satisfied with, so you wouldn't be all bitter and resentful. It's like, okay, what do you want from your family? What do you want from your friends? How are you going to educate yourself? What do you want for your career? How are you going to use your time outside of work? How are you going to handle drugs and alcohol and other temptations like that? How are you going to keep yourself mentally and physically healthy? And these are open questions, like, you get to answer them. The idea is you can have whatever you want, but you have to figure out what it is. It has to be realistic, and you have to figure out what it is. It's okay. So now develop a vision. What's your life going to be like in 3 to 5 years? So you write it down. Then we do something else, which is, okay, your bad habits and your resentment and your bitterness and all of that, your procrastination gets completely out of hand, and you auger down, and you're in your own personal version of hell in 3 to 5 years. What does that look like? Well, everyone knows that. It's like everyone can look into the future and think, well, if I keep going on this dark path, this is where I'll end up. Well, then you've got little hell outlined for yourself to run away from, and you got a little heaven outlined for yourself to run towards, and then you're motivated. Because sometimes, you're just hopeful. I would like a good thing to happen. It's like, yeah, but I'd like to drink half a bottle of whiskey tonight too. It's like, so which is it going to be? Well, just being hopeful about the future might not be enough, but then you think, oh, I see, like there's that little hell thing that I outlined that's waiting for me. And maybe I'm afraid of taking the next step forward because it's demanding and challenging. It's like, yeah, I'm afraid of that, but I'm way more afraid of where I might end up if I don't get my act together. And people should be. That's why there are conceptions of hell in so many religions. It's like, hell's a real place. Whether it's eternal, that's a whole different question. Whether it's waiting for you in the afterlife, that's a whole different question. But if you've never met anyone in hell, you haven't lived very long. You haven't had your eyes open.
Yeah, it's undeniable. That feeling of total, complete misery is undeniable.
Yeah, especially when it's compounded by the fact that you did it to yourself.
Yes.
That's the real fun. That's the real fun part. It's like, I'm having a bitch of a time and I richly deserve it. Jesus, that's rough, man.
This is another concept that doesn't have a voice right now. This is this is a giant part of being a human being. And instead of identity politics and right versus left, I think these right versus left battles, oftentimes what they are is simply the battleground for the conflicts in your own mind.
Yeah. Better to have the conflict in yourself. That's another thing I really learned, well, not only from the New Testament, but a fair bit from that. The idea is that, well, there's evil in the world of all sorts, and some of it's the evil in other people, and some of it's the evil in your brother's heart. But the part of it that you can really do something about, that's the malevolence in your own heart. You can actually do something about that, and that's actually way more useful than you think. So, because if you can face it in you, then you start to understand it, and that also makes you strong enough to identify it and to fight it when you see it in the external world. Plus, you don't do any harm. It's like there's lots of people all over the world going out and doing reprehensible things, and you might say, well, you should go out and protest against them. And sometimes you should, but most of the time you should think, where am I falling short of the ideal? My own ideal. Doesn't have to be one that someone puts on you. Where am I less than I should be? Where am I bitter? Where am I making the world a worse place than it has to be? Like, you ask yourself those questions, you'll be in for a big shock. You say, well, what would happen if you stopped doing that? That's what 12 Rules for Life is about. It's like, stop saying things that make you weak. Stop telling lies that you know to be lies. Stop doing things you know to be useless and counterproductive. Aim high. Adopt some responsibility. And then see what the hell happens. It's like, it'll work. And that's what I'm hoping people will do.